Good afternoon, everybody. We are having an amazing turnout and people are registering and joining us as we speak. I'm Steve Rohde and we'll begin the program at 3 o'clock when we're joined by all of our panelists. We're very grateful that you're here. During the presentations, the chat feature will be disabled, but if you have a question for any of the panelists throughout the program, you can chat that directly to the Icujp Zoom host, who's identified in the list of participants. And you can address a specific question to a panelist, send it to Icujp Zoom host, and we'll curate and gather up those questions and pose as many of them as we can throughout the program. We're thrilled that you're with us. More and more people are signing up, as you can see. And we will start at 3 o'clock sharp, so long as we see all of our panelists being present. So take a moment, get a beverage, relax. We're looking forward to an extraordinary program that will start at 3 o'clock sharp. Icujp, Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace, a long name, but that's because we have a long struggle ahead of us to achieve justice and peace. We were formed 20 years ago this September. It's kind of extraordinary. We were convened by the late Reverend George Regas of All Saints Church in Pasadena of blessed memory, and a group of Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Sikhs, Quakers, and humanists came together under the motto that religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. And we've been at that work for this past 20 years. Because that work is unfinished, let's hope there is a day when we can declare victory for total peace and justice. The organization meets every Friday for our Friday forums at 7:30 a.m. on the West Coast, and you can go to icujp.org for any of this information. During the pandemic, we've had an extraordinary series of speakers on Friday mornings, literally coming from all over the world due to the silver lining of this Zoom technology. Please join us on these Friday mornings. People who've joined us recently have told me how impressed they are with the nature and caliber and breadth of the speakers we've been able to gather. Icujp is a small organization with a hardworking board of directors, and we depend on your support. We have a screen to put up which indicates how you can make donations to Icujp. We only have a small part-time paid staff, but we do have the expenses of running an organization now with a worldwide impact. So you can go to www.icujp.org/donations. All of your support will go to the work that we're doing and really to expanding the work that we hope to do in this year and in many coming years. I'm hopeful that you can appreciate that this kind of work does not happen magically on a Sunday afternoon. Today, I'm extremely grateful to Michael Novick, who is chair of our program committee, in designing and organizing this first of our justice forums. We're grateful because this kickoff event with such terrific speakers augurs well for a series of programs like this one that we're going to hold on times other than 7:30 a.m. on Fridays. That's not to diminish those Friday forums, and we hope you all come and attend those. But we felt that by having programs spread throughout the week or on weekends, as we're seeing today with over 100 people joining us so far, that more and more people can join us. I'm also grateful to Teresa Bazell, who helped us immensely in organizing this program and creating that extraordinary flyer, which attracted so many people to us today. Our communications director is Darren Cobato, who does such an extraordinary job throughout the year, and particularly surrounding these special events. And later in the program, you'll meet my co-chair, Grace Dernis, who will be moderating the second part of our program later this afternoon. We do hope that you'll become active with us, and Grace will later be outlining some action items. We are not a group that simply contemplates the world with starry eyes. We are an activist group. For 20 years, we've engaged in public marches, demonstrations, civil disobedience, meetings with elected officials, conferences, webinars, programs, statements of impact, and calls to action. It is in that activist role we most believe that communities like this can have an impact and can really advance the cause of justice and peace. We've gone through an extraordinary 4 years that we have all suffered through, but we have learned at ICUJP that we have to have an insider-outsider strategy. Whether it was Barack Obama or now Joe Biden, we are no rubber stamp for any governmental administration. And we will oppose a government if it's not advancing the cause of justice and peace, and we will support that government when it's doing so. So I'm delighted that each one of you is with us today. This program is called Backlash to Justice, and I welcome everyone who's joining us at 3 o'clock. ICUJP is very proud to be presenting this program today. Backlash to Justice, Overcoming Roadblocks to Dismantling Systemic Racism. And we have an extraordinary group of panelists with us today. White supremacy, racism, and the resistance to justice do not go away easily, and they do not go away voluntarily. It takes the strength of like-minded people who believe in justice and peace to do that hard work. And we are joined today by two of those people. We are joined by District Attorney George Gascon and Dr. Melina Abdullah. Here we have people fighting for justice, one within the system as District Attorney of the County of Los Angeles, and the other as an activist working outside the electoral system. It was a very conscious choice to invite these two speakers to join us together. We will have some time for each of them to lay out their path toward ending racism and opposing the backlash to justice. We'll have some time for questions and answers. Both of these panelists were gracious in joining us today, but they each have some time constraints. In the second part of the program, you will meet Kellyanne Savage Rodriguez, who's a coordinator with Drop Life Without Parole. And Grace Dernis, along with Teresa, will present the second part of our program, culminating in our calls to action. George Regas, I'm sorry, that's a nice mistake. George Gascon was born in Havana, Cuba, And in 1967, his family emigrated to the United States. After serving in the US Army, DA Gascon graduated from Cal State Long Beach. He's had an extraordinary career. Throughout it, he has served as Assistant Chief of Police in Los Angeles, Chief of Police in Mesa, Arizona, DA and Chief of Police in San Francisco. And as I think everyone knows, last November, he was elected as the District Attorney of Los Angeles. I am very proud to introduce George Gascon, who will present some opening remarks, followed by our second panelist. DA Gascon, please join us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everyone. And is my sound okay?
Yes, it's good.
Great. First of all, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do day in and day out as community activism that makes a difference. And frankly, it is thanks to many of you that I am the district attorney. I'm going to give you a very quick overview of sort of my journey, but I'm really going to jump into today so that then we can look forward to hearing from Dr. Abdullah and then being able to answer questions that you may have. But as Steve indicated, my journey came through policing. I came from being a part of the system, rising through the ranks, and going through an evolution in my own life where, first of all, I thought that we needed to reform the system, and then getting to the conclusion that actually the system really did not need reform because the system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was to incarcerate large numbers of Black and brown people. And I based that in the historic reality of our nation, where policing and prosecution really to a great extent had a lot of its origination was part of the institution of slavery. Pre-Civil War, there was often patrols that were set up to go and find runaway slaves and bringing them back. In post-Civil War, it was really about how to continue a slavery-like system. And we see then the creation of many new laws and legislative schemes that basically created a system around how to incarcerate Black people and continue to keep them in slave-like conditions. And then as we move into the 20th century, that also added Latinos and other groups. And then we get into the 1980s and 1990s, and we went into the hyper-incarceration period. California went from incarcerating roughly 23,000 people in our prison system at any given time to, by 1990, we're right around 96,000, and then after 1994 and the passage of 3 strikes, very quickly we jump into about 160,000 people in California prison systems, and we continue that until AB 109, which was the realignment, and then Prop 47, which actually really became one of the major decarcerators in the state. And there have been other reforms, of course, Prop 36, Prop 57, and many others, which I know many of you are extremely familiar and have been part of. But what is happening today in LA, and what is so relevant to our conversation today, where I think we really need to address, and I think Steve Rody started this conversation, is with my election and that of others around the country, what we have seen is a tremendous backlash from the people that have been involved in the culture of incarceration in this country for decades now. And in LA County, it became very acute, very fast. Literally within a week from the time that I got elected, and I announced a series of directives which actually were exactly the things that I promised that I would do if I were to be elected, like no longer seeking the death penalty, no longer transferring children to adult court, reducing prison enhancements, holding police accountable and beginning to create a system that would bring police accountability, creating greater transparency around our work. Within a week, there were people actually going on Facebook page and starting a recall, and they finally had to be educated. So, well, you got to wait at least 90 days according to the state constitution, before you actually start collecting signatures and file. And they dutifully waited the 90 days and immediately filed. And they are, they're out there collecting signatures. But what is really remarkable about the process is not so much the recall itself, but it is what is driving the recall and who is engaging in this. We are seeing a very right-wing conservative driving force, and they are very craftily, I would say, using some victims of violent crime that are very traumatized as sort of the face of the process. And they have very, I would say, very craftily picking up people of color, Latinos and African-American parents that maybe they're grieving the loss of a son or a daughter or a loved one, and making the face of this. But immediately, as soon as you peel the onion, what you're seeing very conservative, people like, Steve Cooley, former district attorney in LA, Dennis Zine, former member of the LAPD, director of the LA Police Protective League, and later city council person in the Valley, Michael Antonovich, the former supervisor in LA County, and many people alike. And you see the money and the machine that is working behind this. And this is happening as I am pushing for reform. And I have to say that the first 100 days, just very, very quickly, we have been able to reduce about 71% of the use of enhancements in my office. That really translated into over 8,000 years of potential incarceration time. And that doesn't mean that some people did not go to prison or jail. It just simply means that we did not send people for decades on end unnecessarily. And to put that into dollars and cents, you're talking over the life of those 8,000 years plus, you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars that can go into schools, can go into social services, many other things that we know that would create a much better environment. We have immediately stopped seeking the death penalty, and we have 17 cases that were on track for the death penalty in LA County, no longer the case. We stopped transferring 77 kids so far, actually more by now, but just as of the 100th day, that could have gone and were on track to go to adult prison. Why am I saying all this? Because I'm saying this because I think it's important that we contextualize what has been achieved in the first 100 days that you all have been a part of by supporting the movement and by supporting me, but also what would this look like if we continue in this direction, what the impact will be in our community, and what are the consequences if we were to fail. And failure in this case, for me, I think it would be obviously that there was a successful recall. This is important. There are lives, there is a great deal of things that are at stake here. And I think, I would say this, and then before I turn it over to Dr. Abdullah, and then hopefully for a broader conversation, understanding that there is a national focus in what is going to happen in LA County. And both for the progressive movement, which I am part of, but also for the people that are supporting sort of going back, whether you're in the bail industry, whether you're in the police unions or in the district attorneys associations and unions. This is a parting of the water moment for all of us. And depending on how we end up or how San Francisco ends up, it will have a tremendous impact for at least for a decade. And I say about a decade because we are on the right side of history, by the way. Whether this recalls were successful or not, you cannot turn the clock back. But it will be a major hiccup and it will be a major setback, whether either my recall or the one in San Francisco were to be successful. And with that, I'm going to stop. I'd love to hear from Dr. Abdullah, and then take your questions. And thank you so much for your time.
So should I just jump in? Or Steve, do you need to say something before I jump in? I can go ahead? Great. Well, it's wonderful to be here with you. And
Doctor,
yes.
I'm sorry. It would be rude of me not to introduce you.
Okay.
And that was my plan until the powers that be could unmute me. I am rarely muted in my work or in my struggle. I just want to tell the audience, many of whom know you, that it was in 2020 that you were the chief spokesperson for the Jackie Lacey Must Go movement, which brings us to where we are today. Dr. Abdullah is a womanist, scholar, activist, and prolific author and recognized expert on race and gender, class, and social movements. She co-founded Black Lives Matter LA and continues in that leadership. She's a professor and former chair of Pan-African Studies at Cal State University LA and co-host of 2 programs on KPFK. So please, we're eager to hear from you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So I am grateful to be here. And, you know, in all honesty, when I saw the flyer come out, I was like, wow, what a strange turn of events that my face is next to the DA's face, considering we spent almost 3.5 years working to oust the former DA. And so that is kind of the turn of events is what I wanted to talk about with my 10 minutes before we get into Q&A. We want to absolutely uplift that these progressive justice reforms that DA Gascon outlined, we want to go back a little bit because they're talking about them. We see media talking about them. We see opponents talking about them as Gascon's reforms. And I want to be really clear that when George began running for district attorney or was trying to make the decision about whether or not to run for district attorney, one of the early things that he did was reach out to Black Lives Matter. And I don't know if you remember me being late to our meeting at Starbucks near USC and having a really good, honest, open conversation. I was very clear that I was hesitant, given his policing background. We had honest conversation, and then we laid out what we'd like to see. And of course, at the top of our list is Black Lives Matter, was the hundreds of people who were killed by police in LA County, and that police weren't being held accountable. But also on the list were things like the death penalty, things like 3 strikes, things like ending gang enhancements. And we had these conversations about this, and we saw these as the people's progressive justice reforms. And we had been fighting for, again, 3 years at this point with the sitting district attorney, Jackie Lacey, around these reforms. And we're putting this out there as our agenda. And we never endorsed George Gascon. We simply said Jackie Lacey must go. And, you know, when he finally took office and laid out what his agenda was, and his agenda lined up with our agenda perfectly. And he said, every single thing on our list is what he planned to get done. It was, you know, we had to kind of do some soul searching as an organization because we're used to having to push back on elected officials. I want to be very clear that we don't believe that the kind of transformation that we need in this world is ever going to happen solely through elected officials, right? We know that what Steve and Icujp are talking about when they talk about an inside-outside strategy is the only way fundamental transformation, fundamental change has ever come to be. There has to be a willingness of folks on the inside and a push of those insiders, but there also have to be boots on the ground constantly on the outside demanding, making demand, right? Power concedes nothing without demand. It never has and it never will, right? And so it means that we have to continue doing this work. But the election of George Gascon, the ousting of Jackie Lacey, also is a reminder of the power of the people. that when we began protesting Jackie Lacey, we knew which opponents we were facing. We knew that the ALADS, Association of Los Angeles Deputy Sheriffs, we knew that the LAPPL, Los Angeles Police Protective League, we knew that the many of the district attorneys in her office were our opponents. And we knew that we didn't have their money. We knew that we didn't have their political access, but we knew that we had the power of the people and it was going to be a long struggle. And when we won, when we were able to finally unseat Jackie Lacey, what it revealed to us is not just that long-lasting protest matters, that every single person who was out there matters. You know, many of you all have seen us out there and saw us towards the end of our demonstrations when we were there by the tens of thousands, but you didn't see when we were there and we were just 5 people trying to huddle up under an awning in the rain because we were not going to let a week pass without engaging in this protest and demanding this kind of transformative change. And so I'm saying all that to say that the people have power. And these are the people's progressive justice reforms. And we're not going to cede power to those who have never wanted Black people or brown people or indigenous people or poor people to be free, right? We need to remember that the forces who are coming at George Gascon are tethering themselves to a very old and outdated and dying form of what they called justice. They're tethering themselves to that, but we seek to undo that. We seek to upend that, and we seek to usher in a new form which really is empowering, which really is restorative, and which really provides freedom and liberation for our people. And so we've now, we're no longer protesting the district attorney. Our new hashtag, our hashtag went from Jackie Lacey must go to stand with George. But we're also hashtagging end police associations. I think one of the things that is really poignant about what you said, DA Gascon, is that we have to think about how the very real pain of actual victims, of actual crime survivors, is being manipulated by, again, those who are tethering themselves to old forms. And so it's disgusting that people like Alex Villanueva and the LAPPL and ALADS and even the Association for Deputy District Attorneys would be really preying upon and seizing upon the real pain of crime survivors and hashtagging things like victims matter when they really don't care about victims. And we can see that in their policies and their positioning. And so Black Lives Matter has now moved our Wednesday protests to in front of the LAPPL, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, which is the police association that pretends to be a union. It's not, I'm a union member, right? Unions mean solidarity with other working class people. And so we have decided that we are going to stand with George, and we are going to end police associations and really upend the unjust power of police who steal the lives of our people, and uplift the power of the people to transform the world that's livable and free and helps all of us, nurtures all of us as we move towards a society that's fit for the lives of our children and the generations to come. And so I'm very grateful to be in partnership with all of you. I'm grateful to the Icujp community as well as DA Gascon. It's, you know, we're going to hold you accountable, but right now you're going hard and we are standing with you and we have your back. And I'm grateful for one correction, as I am not the main spokesperson. I want to be clear that Black Lives Matter believes in group-centered leadership, and I'm grateful to be a part of what Dr. King called a beloved community, and I see many of our community members who are on this call, so I'm grateful for all of their work and to be able to speak on our collective behalf.
Thank you so much, Melina. I don't think you can run away from how powerful a spokesperson you really are. DA Gascon, before we go to questions and answers, I wanted to give you the space to mention your appointment of a special prosecutor, Lawrence Middleton, and quickly the Victims Advisory Board. Those are two important things.
Sure, Steve. So if you recall, and I know Dr. Abdullah would recall this because this was part of conversations that we had, and something that I made very public is that if I were to be elected, I would create a special prosecutor that would look at older police shootings. That we would also create a community advisory board that would work with community, those impacted by police violence, as well as civil rights specialists, and we're doing both. So I went through basically a very in-depth search for the right personality, the right skill set. And Lawrence Middleton, and for those of you do not know Mr. Middleton was with the U.S. Justice Department. He was the lawyer that successfully prosecuted the officer in the Rodney King case on the federal side. Tremendous, background, not only within the Justice Department, but also doing civil rights work. And I was very fortunate to convince Mr. Middleton to join as a special prosecutor. And while he will have the authority of my office and myself, he is independent. He will be independent in his work. He will decide, which direction to go, because I thought that was critically important. He will begin looking at 4 cases that we identified during the campaign. And these were cases that a group of us identified after reviewing probably about 60 other cases as cases that should be reopened. At the same time, we're also getting together a community advisory board of both families that have been impacted by police violence and civil rights lawyers. And we have the University of California Irvine's law clinic has agreed to help us look at somewhere around 600 police killings that go all the way to 2012, which again was part of my commitment in this work. And then the other thing that we did is I always said that we wanted to really be victim-centered, but we want to use science and we want to be really solid. And we knew that all the national data around survivors of crime is that the majority of the survivors want 2 things. Number one, they want to be provided with services that are trauma informed, that is a harm mitigation process. And actually, interestingly enough, about 60% of them want rehabilitation for their assailants because they understand that in order to reduce recidivism, we have to work on rehabilitating people. And interestingly enough, as we put together this advisory board that actually I'm going to be swearing in later in this coming week, Bender and Associates, which is a very reputable polling company, went out and did a poll in LA County of victims of violence and survivors. And the numbers in LA County are identical to the national numbers. About 60% of survivors of violent crime, they actually were very critical of my office and the way that we provided victim services and not the lack of trauma-informed care. But they were also very supportive of rehabilitative measures in order to reduce recidivism. And that is an incredible affirmation for the work that we're doing, because we know that while there are some victims that may be wanting retribution at the moment, and we know that that's being exploited, we know that that doesn't necessarily repair the harm. It doesn't really create for a path for reducing the harm that is caused by violence. And we also know that taking care of people that may have harmed someone today, if we can reduce the likelihood of them reoffending in the future by dealing with their own trauma as well, we're actually protecting and reducing the number of future victims. So the 2 things are moving forward, Steve. We have the special prosecutors coming in front of the Board of Supervisors this week, and I encourage all of you to participate and comment. It still has to be approved. by the Board of Supervisors, and then the advisory board will be hopefully kicking off in the next 3 or 4 weeks. We're also waiting for approval from the board.
Thank you. As we turn this over, I want everyone to be able to go to the website of DA George Gascon with his March 17 100-day report on what has been achieved so far, as well as resources to base policing and prosecution on science and data, and the report of the survey that DA Gascon just referred to. So please take advantage of those resources. And now we'll turn it over to our host for some additional questions.
Yes, thanks. And I apologize for having had my sound on and interfered slightly. One of the questions already been answered, I think, by the district attorney, which was how to address the manipulation of crime survivors, including people of color. There were a group of questions that had to do with dealing with police violence, a question about the West Hollywood 7 who were brutalized and traumatized by the LA Sheriff's Department on September 25th. A question regarding the likelihood of any prosecution for the Pasadena police killing of Anthony McLean, and a general question about a realistic timetable for reopening some of the cases of police killings as was promised to families. Another question, I think, to both is...
Michael?
Sure, okay.
Okay, so let me try to summarize all of that, because I think I want to make sure that I'm respectful of time, but I also want to answer all of you that have the questions. In very general terms, Mr. Middleton will begin the process of reviewing the 4 cases that we identified during the election as potential cases for reopening. As he is doing that work, we have the UCI Law Clinic is going to begin the screen down of cases all the way down to 2012. Those are nearly 600 cases. And then if they see cases that appear to have the components of a potential case that could be criminal, then that would be transferred over to Mr. Middleton or my office, depending on the workload, because once Mr. Middleton decides to go on the case, he will very quickly become, very busy. We're also in the process of adding additional lawyers in re-engineering, the unit that we do what we call JSIC, which is a unit that looks at police shootings and criminal behavior by on-duty police officers, because we need to have more resources in that area to do the look. As to what the timeline is, these are complicated cases, and Mr. Middleton is a very experienced prosecutor, but he's going to take his time, because if he does move forward with a case, which will be entirely his decision, by the way, I will not interfere one way or the other, he needs to make sure that he has the resources. I can tell you unequivocally that we are very committed to looking at bad police conduct on duty, especially criminal conduct. And we are going to act on it, but we have to be very strategic about how we do the work, because it really comes down to resources. I'll give you a perfect example. If Mr. Middleton decides to move forward 1 or 2 cases, he will be tied up for the next year, 2 or 3 years in 1 or 2 cases. So how we handle this has to be extremely strategic. On the other hand, we also move towards, for instance, asking all the police agents in the county to begin to provide Brady information, which in the past they haven't regularly, and quite frankly, the former DA refused to ask for it because he did not want to deal with it. So we're doing many other things aside from just simply looking at cases to prosecute bad police behavior, to clean up the system and to address issues of racism. For instance, very recently, just a few days ago, there was a traffic collision in the Santa Clarita area involving a retired LAPD detective, a homicide detective, and we got a hold of a video showing how this man was using extremely racist language. We immediately took a look back. We saw that there were at least 357 cases where he had been involved as a witness. Some of the cases may be ongoing cases. Interestingly enough, he was a homicide detectives. So the cases, we could be compromised in very serious cases, but we are already notifying all the defense lawyers in all those cases to make sure that they understand that we have, Brady information that may impact those cases. Under the old administration, that would have never happened, and it would have been until the LA Times starts jumping and maybe BLM or other groups start asking for it that would happen. I got the information actually from a reporter, interestingly enough, who sent me the link to the video. And within 5 hours, we had identified the cases. And by the following morning, we were sending letters to the defense lawyers. So I say all this to tell you, not because I want to, what I want is I want you to understand the scope of this and all the progress that is being made, but also understand that some of these things will take time.
This is a couple of questions that were addressed to both Dr. Abdullah and to the district attorney. One is regarding restorative justice. How can we take some measures to apply techniques of restorative justice when both parties agree that would be a way to proceed? And also a question regarding the plight of the undocumented in Los Angeles, and does the DA have a role in dealing with that issue? And I don't know if Dr. Abdullah had anything she wanted to say about the question of some of the families who have had lives stolen and people brutalized in protesting those killings and so on.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of underscore what's being done. So to be clear, my understanding is that there are 4 cases that were already promised for reopening, but beyond that, we're going to be looking, we're going to be looking at all of the cases, because I think that what DA Gascon has done has really, one of the things that I'm most encouraged by is his willingness to stay community connected. So there is a body that includes Black Lives Matter, that includes Central CSO, that includes really grassroots level attorneys who've represented folks in cases like this, who are going to be looking at all of these cases. But I also neglected in my opening statements to say that as we talk about the 634 folks whose lives were stolen by police violence since 2012, it's really important that we remember not just that number, and we can find information about each of these killings. We launched something that we call the Contemporary Red Record, which is in honor of Mama Ida B. Wells, who had something that she called the Red Record that detailed the lynchings of the late 19th and early 20th century. We see the killings of our people at the hands of police as contemporary lynching. So if people want to hear about these cases, they can go to prosecutekillercops.org, prosecutekillercops.org. And we built that Contemporary Red Record in order to honor these lives, but also to hold police accountable. And it's not just a number. So the number is there and you can go to see each of the cases, but it's also about the real lives of people. So I just want to talk quickly about 2 of the people whose lives are going to have more meaning as we begin to think about their cases, as DA Gascon has committed to reopening those cases. And so we've been working for years with the family of Brendan Glenn, who's a father, who was a loving human being, whose cousin Grace has been joining us at our Jackie Lacey Must Go protests for years, who has reached out and really kind of built a sense of loving community among those family members, and who's really encouraged and has a deeper sense of hope in our people about the reopening of Brendan Glenn's case, right? I want us to think about Christopher DeAndre Mitchell, who was killed in Torrance, California. And there are people on this call. I saw Carrie on this call and others on this call who every single Tuesday night since December of 2018 have been pressing for justice in the name of Christopher DeAndre Mitchell alongside his mother, Cheryl Lynn Haynes. So I'm saying that to say that when we talk about these progressive justice reforms, this isn't just about numbers. This isn't just about the 77 children who won't be tried as adults or the end to the death row cases. What was it, 17 death row cases? It's not just about the numbers. It's about real human beings. And so it's really important that we uplift that, because I know that we're also in a spiritual space, that this is much more than policy devoid of humanity. This is about humanity and what kind of world we want to live in. And so I just want to uplift that. I want us to be encouraged to double down on our work. And I want us to be encouraged to take this step forward as one that leads to many, many, many more steps and hastens the victory that's sure to come.
Thank you, Melina. As we begin to close this segment, DA Gascon, if you had comments on those remarks, restorative justice, and any role regarding undocumented persons.
No, I just first I want to say that Dr. Abdullah, Melina, which is so great to see you. I think that Dr. Abdullah hit this right on the nail. This is really about community. And, what I often tell people, by the way, I am a temporary occupant of a space. It's a space that belongs to the people. And what I'm committed to doing in working with the community is to make sure that while I'm this temporary occupant, that we create a sustainable model so that future occupants of the space, which will always be temporary occupants, also continue to work in revering and working with the community. The only thing that never changes is this is really about the community, right? Whether we're talking about today or 100 years from now, these are places for the community. And those of us that are fortunate enough and are honored by by the community to be able to hold these roles, it is not about us. None of this is about us. Reform is not about us. Reform is about community. But going very quickly to the questions concerning restorative justice and whether the DA has a role concerning our undocumented population. As to restorative justice, I'm here happy to tell you that actually Alisa Blair, who is a lawyer that we brought over very recently, who is an incredible lawyer, has been working many, many years in the area of juvenile justice, is actually moving forward. And our goal is to be able to begin to implement fully restorative justice models with juvenile, and immediately thereafter begin to process that into young adults and eventually make that a center of our practice. I am a strong believer in restorative justice. I've seen it work. We in San Francisco actually did the work with researchers. We actually have scientific evidence that it way outperforms the traditional system. So I'm very committed to making that not a boutique approach to our work, but one of my dreams is to make that the centerpiece of our work. Concerning our role with undocumented, we absolutely have a role, and that role is to do no harm, right? And what do I mean by do no harm? That role is to make sure that our policies, when we're addressing issues that come to our attention, that we address them in a way that is thoughtful and that it doesn't create harm to the community as we're trying to protect others. So we are within weeks of publishing a one directive that will deal directly with the undocumented population in our work. I purposely did not publish that in my first rollout because there were so many other things that we were doing, and I was also afraid to having system overload. As it is, we put a lot on the first day, but we are in the process of creating a structure that would ensure that when we're filing cases or when we're reviewing cases or when we're resentencing, that we're very careful with the immigration consequences. Also, providing an avenue for those that are coming back that are seeking perhaps to be resentenced because they They might have pled for a particular charge years ago, and unknowing that it would have a severe consequences in their ability to be regularized, that where it's appropriate that we will allow that resentencing, which is something that the office didn't always do. So we want to create some uniformity. We want to create a central point to make sure that the things are managed right. We also want to make sure that things like U visas and T visas, which are is a federal program that allows sometimes survivors of violent crime or trafficking to be able to be regularized, that we are doing that in a way that is thoughtful. Again, my office in the past sometimes denied some of those petitions with, really just simply because I could. And I want to make sure that we don't do that. So yes, we have a role and we're going to play a very active part of our role. And then finally, just really letting our community know often and continuously that someone's immigration status is not a factor in the path for us to provide whatever services we provide. And I have to tell you that while we have traditionally focused in a broader aspect of the work here, the last week or so, well, the last more than a week actually, the last 2 or 3 weeks have been really focusing on the impact on the Asian American community. And of course, we had this horrendous act that occurred in Georgia. And we're really very, very focused to make sure that hate crimes that often also impact not only our Black community and our brown community, LGBTQ, and many other communities also has sometimes a very specific focus in our Muslim community and in communities of immigrants. And we want to make sure that our communities understand that we're here for them.
Thank you both. We're immensely grateful to you. We may have hit upon a format, and I want to offer an open invitation that we will have you both back periodically to do exactly this kind of accounting and to hold each of you accountable in your work. We thank you.
Can I just ask one quick question before we go?
Yes, please.
So I neglected to uplift one of the questions that had been asked about timelines for prosecutions for police. And I know you can't give us a date, but we're 100 days in, 90 days in.
100.
Looking
100 days.
100 days?
Yeah.
Are we looking at another 100 days? Are we looking at how long do you think it will be before we see our first prosecutions?
Yes, so assuming that the Board of Supervisors approves Mr. Middleton's role as a special prosecutor, then he will take the reign of those 4 cases, the 2 of that you mentioned today and the other 2. He will begin that review, and that will be completely on his timeline. And it's important, of course, that whatever direction he decides to go, that we support him, but it will be entirely his role, his direction. We are also looking at other cases independent of that, more contemporary cases. We really cannot put a timeline because I don't want to, these things cannot be rushed. We got to make sure that we're doing right. But what I want to reassure you and everybody else on this call and people that may not be on the call, but maybe on Zoom, on FaceTime, or on, the streaming services, these cases are being looked at one by one very, very closely. If there is a criminality involved that can be prosecuted, there will be. There will not be a look the other way. I'm very committed to this work, but we have to do it right. We have to make sure that if we take a case, and I say if because I'm sure there will be cases that will be taken that is the right case and is done right.
But we're not looking at 4 years from now, is what we want.
No.
We're looking at as quickly as we can possibly move. You just can't give us a date.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. It will not be 4 years from now.
Okay.
Thank you both. This is insider, outsider advocacy right before our very eyes. And I'm so grateful to both of you. Thank you for today. I'm turning the program over to Teresa and to introduce our next segment. Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And What a tremendous discussion we're having. As we just heard, restorative justice and the prison system is another big part of this discussion. And we know that mass incarceration and unjust punitive sentencing are destructive aspects of our criminal justice system, and they urgently need to be addressed. And sentences of life without parole are a particularly abusive tool in that system. Kelly Savage Rodriguez is the coordinator of Drop Life Without Parole, a program of the California Coalition of Women Prisoners. In December 2017, Governor Jerry Brown commuted her life without parole sentence. She was released on parole almost a year later in November of 2018. When she was released, Kelly was 46 years old, and she had been incarcerated for 23 years for a crime she did not commit. As a survivor of domestic violence, Kelly has learned the similarities between domestic violence and the violence of incarceration. During her incarceration, she became an activist and a peer educator, and she was one of the inside members of California Coalition for Women Prisoners for 15 years. Kelly helped to create the program End Life Without Parole, and now she is the coordinator of that program. Her experience, her knowledge, her dedication brings so much to this discussion we're having, and we are very fortunate to have her with us. So thank you for joining us today, Kelly, and welcome.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate everybody for being here today. Such a enlightening conversation. And I'm just glad to be able to talk about life without the possibility of parole. I know that George Gascon has taken some steps to offer some support as well and look at individuals in this county. And I hope that he sticks with that commitment. As we move forward in our movement, we're trying to end extreme sentencing as a whole, but we understand that life without the possibility of parole is a sentence that is often forgotten. People talk about the death penalty and people talk about lifers, but in the middle section is those individuals who are stuck in a system being told that you're not worth rehabilitation, you're just a seat in a room, you don't have the same conversations, the same groups that you can attend, the same job you can attend as someone that you're sharing a cell with. And it's a very demeaning and hollow existence if you choose to stay stuck in what they want us to believe is the rest of our life. And I understand that we have to honor victims in the process. That is always our number one in the conversation is not forgetting victims in this situation, but every single person you deal with every day is changing and growing in some form or fashion, regardless of what age they are, regardless of what age they were when they made those mistakes. And as we move forward, we're hoping to bring the conversation back to looking at every individual as redeemable and understanding that right now the system views individuals like myself as throwaways. We aren't allowed to do most things. We're isolated from family a lot of times because we're at higher level institutions where families can't get to as easily. We're denied educational opportunities. There's so many areas that we could create reform and we could offer up more services, but unfortunately we're kind of stuck in a system that tells us we need to put everybody else first. If you're lucky, you might get in the room. And that's never okay, especially when we have seen some reform, working on different cases at this point, a lot of commutations. These individuals were fighting hard to say, I am somebody, I'm not just a number, and I'm doing the work. I'm doing the work to help the people that are about to get out and myself. A lot of LWOPs are individuals who run most groups because they have the ability and the time, the dedication to say, I want to make the community that's going back out with my community to be safe. So I want these individuals to have healing and growth. And so as an LWOP, I chose to be dedicated to creating change while I was in. And hopefully I will be able to bring more brothers and sisters out here as well that can show their same growth if we just push for more reform. I think it's important to look at what the Drop LWOP movement has done. We've had the ability to engage with several organizations in order to offer their support on the Drop LWOP movement. We have over 100 that have chose to look for ways to support people inside and see the change that they have created, even in a dark, scary place that doesn't offer resources to individuals serving life without. We have people thriving in there because they have the drive and the dedication to heal and to reform. And honestly, there's a lot of people, because they were incarcerated as juveniles, who didn't have the initial ability to learn some of the skills they're learning in prison. Most of our LWOPs start at a very young age. The average age is about 19. And so they're not considered like every other lifer. Age comes into play with your scientific evidence that your brain hasn't developed fully. For anyone that has not been sentenced to life without or the death penalty, they look at that brain science to say that we need to look at their culpability different, their understanding of a crime differently. But just because a prosecution goes after life without, they don't have that same benefit that someone else will have, unfortunately. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Kelly. Yes, there was a question. There was a question asked as to whether there is any particular legislation right now or bills pending to eliminate LWOP. If you could speak to that.
So it's not directly looking at eliminating LWOP, but we do have a couple bills that are pending right now looking at life without individuals who were maybe in a felony murder situation, and that's SB 300 would give you an opportunity to look at more, broaden it out to allow more individuals who aren't the direct perpetrators. A lot of people don't understand that there can be several people prosecuted for the same situation. Always referring back to one gun, one body, one bullet, and you have 5 people on the same case. Not everyone's going to know exactly why a decision was made or what happened in that, and you can't make someone else do something or stop doing something. And in that moment, every single one of them is now facing life without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. And that's shocking for a lot of people to understand. When we were working, or when California was working on tough on crime bills, they made it a very broad scope. So you don't have to find out which one's a perpetrator and which ones are aiding and abettors, or active participant versus someone who is in a car when a crime is committed in a building. And so with that, this will branch it out just a little bit more, not enough. Everything is chipping away at a little bit more of it. There's a couple other ones. Levine has another bill that he's working on to look at individuals who have not had any violence within the institution for the last 20 years. Looking at their programming to see if they could potentially have some relief, but unfortunately nothing directly to, hopefully we'll have something to look at that juvenile for anyone arrested under the age 26, because their brain doesn't develop differently just because of the prosecutor, but the judges don't have the discretion. Judges are asking for assistance from legislators and from Sacramento, because they have these cases coming before them to appeal a sentence saying, I'm no different than my cellie who also committed the same type of crime. He was just a 25 to life, and I was life without. So we're hoping that will change. But at this point, their felony murder SB 300 is probably the best bet to get people's support.
One more question that came in. Can you talk about some of the things you're doing to address the problem of LWOP? And I think that might mean also for the people who are actually serving that sentence, how you relate with them, and also people facing the possibility of that sentence.
Yes, definitely. I am blessed enough to try to be in contact with all 5,100. We had 5,200. So we're down a little bit. That's pretty amazing in the 2 years that I've been out. Not enough. But what I try to do is I try to contact each of the different institutions and request anybody, if you have a friend that is serving the sentence, please let them know. I have a lot of family members that I connect with to offer support as well, both for the individual outside and the individual inside. The truth is a lot of families were silenced when the crime occurred. For all the different reasons, the court system does that on purpose. And so our purpose is to get those family members engaged again, also remind them that their voices matter in this movement. A lot of them just don't know. It seems so, difficult and, hard to get through the system itself. So they're just trying to survive it and support their loved one inside, knowing that 1,000% they are doing the life without the possibility of parole sentence right along with the incarcerated individual. And that's really important to acknowledge and offer that support. So we try to do that as well. We invite them to engage on our Monday night meetings, our third Monday of the month. We have a drop LWOP call where people get together and work on different subcommittees if they choose to. It's a lot to immediately say, I want to join a subcommittee and I want to start working. But they can just join and listen in and hear about the different groups. And so that you have the opportunity to look at our website as well as engage with any one of us. I'll ask them to, I don't know if I can link the chat, but I can ask them to put my email address as well to offer any type of support and, education about what we've done so far. We have a status report that we did from a seminar, a couple-day seminar, just how can we address this issue and what do we need to do? And with that, we took back several different committees. One works on media, one is looking at legislation because we want to offer up legislation to change some of these things, as well as looking at, thank you for putting the website up there on the chat. But having the opportunity to go into the clemency work group, which is my baby. And so what we do there is we work directly with individuals to work on a commutation or board support or court support, whatever that may look like for them. We have a commutation guide on how to fill that out. It's a lengthy packet, but if they, take it down bit by bit and work on, what your life is like today, not just what you went through at the time of your crime, but we also want to look at today and what good things individuals are doing inside, because the truth is people aren't sitting around watching TV. People are fighting to get into groups and do the hard work. Every single day I would have people stop me on the walkway to, join another one of my groups or facilitate one of my groups. And it was about, getting more people involved. It's hard to do, but people want it. And that's what a lot of society doesn't understand. People work on a daily basis to better themselves inside. And so we want more of the community to know that. So we have a media team. I was absolutely blessed to join one of your guys' meeting. Now I have the right email address so I can get on your Friday morning calls, because I didn't have it until now. And I was absolutely amazed and in fact, emotional being on the call on Friday morning, and everyone just was so welcoming and wanted to learn about Drop LWOP, and it was absolutely amazing to have that opportunity. And so what we do is we tell them about groups like this. We went to this this interview with them, a couple different times, part of our team did. And then I was lucky enough to come and speak, for their organization. And inside, individuals are absolutely shocked at how much support they have outside in the community, because they really don't see it. So if they don't know it, if we're not bringing them that information, they don't know how much is out there, and that people do care, that not everyone believes that they're throwaways. Yeah. And we're slowly changing people's minds.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's so great to hear you again. It's so appropriate that you came right at this point in the program, because you brought the personal face to the issues that they were discussing earlier. And that is the important thing we have to keep doing, right? We're so grateful. I'm not sure, Michael, if there's another question or...
No, I did actually open the chat so that everyone can write into the chat, because I know you want to open it up for ideas about action, right?
Right. Kelly has already given us several action items, and I see, Michael, that you have put them in the chat already. So that's wonderful. And just to remind you that, we call ourselves Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. If we're not working for justice, it will not happen. We need to take action. Just sitting here and talking about it is not going to make it happen. So in exactly the way that Black Lives Matter stood outside there and pushed for Jackie Lacey must go, all of us have to be united on these fronts. Black Lives Matter reminds us about, Melina told us about the now shifting that Wednesday afternoon demonstration and protest to 1313 West 8th Street in Los Angeles, to really insist that we fund services and not police. We have to bring down the police associations that function as organized crime, enabling killer cubs, bullying and bribing elected officials, and more than anything, criminalizing our people. So Black Lives Matter invites us to bring our drums, our bodies, our spirits. Let's get out there and keep the pressure on. We can also go to, and all these are in the chat, so you can just get them from there, but you can sign the petition demanding that Mayor Garcetti fire LAPD Chief Moore for all of the longstanding pattern of abuse and his failed leadership. And that link is in the chat, so you can click on it and sign the petition. We just today in the paper saw how many cases have been coming out of police cover-ups, really. And so we've got to put pressure on our elected officials. Email your city council member to demand that the money reallocated from LAPD budget, which came as a result of all those Black Lives Matter protests, remember? Let's not forget those, that they go to Black organizations for the benefit of Black communities. And we want to encourage you to support the reforms from the Office of District Attorney Gascon. We need to continue the progressive justice reforms that he has started. Please send him a note encouraging him to keep it up. It also lets him know that we have our eyes on what he's doing. And so we encourage you to do that. And finally, I want to encourage you to donate to Icujp. We hardly get any staff on we're not doing this with a lot of staff. We're doing it with a lot of volunteers, but we do have an excellent communications person, and we want to keep supporting her. So we need your help to do that, so that we can keep bringing programs like this to you. And we also want you to know that your support means more than just the money. It tells us that you're with us in this work for justice and peace. We need you. And every time you give a single dollar, it says to us, okay, we're all working in this together. So I encourage you to really get to the link that's on the screen now and go to our website and send a donation in, no matter how little it is or how big and expensive it is. We will much appreciate it because it will give us that sense that you're here with us. And finally, I want to ask Fernando to come and present the idea of what we can do to dismantle racism. Are there other things that we can be doing? And he has some ideas there. So I would like to invite him to come forward.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This is really a good presentation. I think we must follow up many of this systemic problem that we are experiencing, not just here in Los Angeles. You know, as Martin Luther King has said, you know, why he opposed the Vietnam War, you know, and the 350 years of slavery, you know, that affect the African American community, you know, is still going on today. We have now, you know, at least 3 million people in jail, and another 4 to 5 million in and out in the jail system. This is really a systemic problem that we have to confront. You know, the budget of the Pentagon is about $3 trillion. Like Reverend Martin Luther King has said, every time there is the money that's supposed to be spent in our social services, and it's not being spent in the rightful place. This is what happened: the criminalization of our youth. You know, in particular here in Los Angeles, the highest in terms of incarceration. So maybe continue to support many of these organizations, like the last presenter. You know, we will still continue to work many of this, but encouraging people to stay on, to organize ourselves, because this is like I said, you know, it's hard to swallow an elephant, but if we slice the elephant to pieces, we can easily swallow it. And so this is our role, you know, and this is a lot of tasks that we need to come to terms with. I guess that's all I could say right now.
Thank you so much. And we want to invite everybody, if you would like to join a working group that is dedicated to ending systemic racism, please put your name in the chat and say that. Maybe Fernando will put his email address in the chat as well, so that you can write to him directly and we can organize a working group around this topic. I wonder now whether there are any pending issues, Michael, that we need to address. Were there any that came up in the chat?
Well, I just want to urge people to save the chat. You can do so if you if you open the chat and there are 3 little dots. If you click on those 3 dots, it will give you the option to save the chat. That way you can go back and find some of the references and links, the mentions of the Assembly bills and Senate bills, and so on, the location of the Wednesday demonstration. I would ask Fernando again, because that was what we had discussed in the committee. He was interested in trying to form, either within Icujp or broader than Icujp, an ongoing coalition to end systemic racism. So if Fernando would type his email, willing to type his email into the chat to share it with everyone who might be interested in that, they could write to him to follow up.
Terrific. Yes, and Kelly's email is now in the chat as well. so you can write to her. Yay, Kelly. We are very grateful to the work that you do. We want to keep supporting it. Listen, today has been a really educational and good meeting. I think that Steve is right at the beginning where he said, we're going to have to keep bringing all of you all back because we need to keep everybody accountable for what we're doing in the way of justice and peace. And so we want to thank you for coming. We had over 125 people, I think up to 130 was the last time I had looked, who joined us on this. And we're very grateful for your presence. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.